Thank you for watching CodeVA's first inaugural Lunch and Learn session recorded on July 12, 2021. This session features Brittany Miller, PhD candidate at George Mason University and former computer science integration and equity coach in Winchester Public Schools. Brittany talks about the state of computer science in the state of Virginia, specifically the metrics grant she was part of in Winchester Public Schools. She also delves into what works for integrating CS and what to avoid.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and see me okay? It's so nice to be here. I want to start by giving a shout out to public libraries. As I mentioned, I love traveling, and I'm actually currently at the South Harbor Public Library in Maine. So slightly unexpected location, but this is where I am, and I'm excited to be meeting with you guys. So before we get started, I just kind of want to feel out who all is here. If you are just an elementary or middle school teacher, can you maybe give me a reaction just so I can kind of see how many of those are in the building? Awesome. Oh, hey, Sarah. What about our high school? Do we have any high school computer science people here? No, I don't think so, because this is all K-5. What about administrators or coaches? So one or two? Great. Okay, well, that's great, because really, I've had the experience of being a coach for the last year. And then prior to that, I was in the classroom. So I feel like we're at a good place. Oh, and that K-12 ESOL, yeah, that's my crew. All right, well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. I feel like CodeVA has been such a crucial part of what I've been able to do in my classroom and then in my coaching career. So I'm so excited to be working with them through this and into the future. So you can go to the next slide, Brian. A little bit about me. I have worked in Virginia and in South Carolina as a teacher, as an educator. Like Brian said, the last little bit, I've actually been an integration and equity coach for a pretty big computer science grant in Winchester Public Schools. Right now, though, I am transitioning to being a full-time PhD student. My coursework actually begins in August. I'm really excited about that. And I will be focusing somewhat into the computer science world. I'm working with a professor there who's doing a lot of research in elementary CS work. So I'm excited to be working with her. If you need me for any reason, this is my email and my Twitter handle. Feel free to hop on and follow me. I haven't been posting a lot recently, but I have a feeling as I move into my graduate program, I will get back in there. So yeah, if there's any questions about me, we'll have a little bit of time at the end, or questions about what I've done that you guys can ask. So let's get started. Oh, sorry, Brian. There's some fun effects happening. So the first thing I wanted to share is really why I am so passionate about computer science. And the more I have taught and worked with teachers and students around computer science, the more I've realized that it is such a matter of equity. It is, when we talk about equity and we talk about gaps in education and gaps in learning, we cannot have that discussion and not talk about computer science, because it is a basic course that all students have to have. They need to have a basic understanding of it. They need to be able to talk about it with each other, and they need to know what they're interacting with on their phones and their tablets and their devices. Whether or not they're going to go into computer science as a career, they all need to have that understanding, the kind of basic understanding of what computer science is and how it impacts their life. And so I just feel like from K on, we need to be introducing that to them, exposing it to them, and letting them get in there and play around with it. So it's a real passion of mine to make sure that all students have that opportunity, which is why I became a part of the metrics grant. You can go to the next slide, Brain, thanks. So metrics stands for maximizing education through regular immersion in computer science. I loved being a part of metrics. I was part of the team that helped write the grant that we received. If you have not checked it out, the website is down at the bottom. Dr. Jennifer LeBombard Daniels is the director of that, and she's phenomenal. It's a great program, and it really has 4 key components. Metrics is about creating curriculum that is integrated computer science curriculum, K through the schools there are only through 4, so K through 4. It's a big focus on teacher development, making sure that teachers understand what they're supposed to be doing, how to do it, and it's giving them that support that so many teachers really need. It's giving students real-world tethers to computer science, so it's not just saying this is something that you can do like one day if you want. It's giving them the connections that they can see themselves in those careers and those roles, or just interacting with computer science and building things and being creators. And then it's student support through like makerspace and STEM classwork, those extracurricular in-school extracurricular classes that students have access to, and making those really valuable to them and connected to the computer science. So that's sort of the 4 pillars of metrics. It's how the grant was written to give support in these 4 areas, with the idea that through this, students will have a true immersive learning experience that helps them build a basis of computer science understanding, so that when they move into middle school, they could, any student, whether or not, whatever devices they have at home, they will have the understanding to walk into a beginning computer science course and start learning a computer science language. We never got into Scratch is typically the highest that any students worked with in our schools, and that's probably going to be the case for a little while, at least, until we have more educators who are familiar with other coding languages. But we started in the younger grades really working with Scratch Junior. The upper grades are going to start working more in Scratch. And then also just the unplugged activities, computational thinking, all of the different elements is embedded into each of these 4 pillars of the program. So that's a little bit about metrics, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But I kind of want to share some of my own experiences because, as you know, this last year and a half has been very unique, and we kind of started this program, smack in the middle of things. So here we are in this sort of new, brave new world where everything's upside down, and we have just added a layer of, hey, guess what, everyone? We're going to be implementing and integrating computer science. Let's go. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about my experiences with that, and how some things that I found that were really challenging and didn't work well, and some things that I actually felt like maybe this was a great opportunity for us. Maybe we will start working this way in the future. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, so teaching in a pandemic. This is a image that I feel like really conveys my personal feelings. I don't know if you have ever watched The Office, but I really resonated with Michael Scott right here. I felt like when we first hear about the, oh, okay, we're moving to virtual learning, I'm like, I've done the flipped classroom. I use Screencastify. I got this. I know exactly what to do. But in reality, I really have no idea what I'm doing, because I'm taking all the pedagogy, all of the curriculum design, everything I've spent the last decade of my life figuring out how to do, and I'm having to like throw it all out the window because none of it's going to work anymore. None of it is, I can't do small group instruction the way I used to do it. I can't get with my students hands-on and help them have that tactile learning. So what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? And how am I supposed to integrate brand new curriculum like computer science? So there were some things I found that really didn't, some negatives that came out of this program or out of the pandemic, but I think some of the more, there's also some positives that came out of it. So first, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that I saw happening both in my own classroom and beyond. Sorry, we're having some traffic come through. This is a public library. Okay, so some of the things I saw happen that I would recommend leaning away from is the first thing a lot of teachers did was they were just like, oh, I'm not teaching computer science. I don't have time. And I get that. Like, it was a stressful time. And many teachers were just like, I can't do this. I'm going to teach just the basics and that's it. Well, my problem with this is just like with anything, when we stop teaching certain content, or we stop giving the experiences that make school meaningful to students, we lose engagement. Not only that, we are widening the gap for our students who do not have access to these things and do not have the experiences that they that other students may have. So if we ever get overwhelmed as educators and we go, well, then I'm just going to stop teaching a certain content area, that's a problem. That's our job. Like, we're educators, and it may be challenging, but we have to overcome those. We have to set our expectations high, and we have to know our students can do these things. So that was something I saw many teachers kind of wanting to just go, I got to cut that out. But then I also saw the teachers who didn't do that, and they rose to it, and they said, nope, I'm going to figure a way out. You know, it may not be the way I would have done it in the classroom, but there's a way for me to get computer science in there. And there's a way for me to still teach science and social studies and all the content areas. And I'm going to figure that out. And so one thing that a positive of that is there are definitely plenty of teachers who continue to strive to create excellent opportunities for students to engage with computer science. Another thing that I've been guilty of in the past myself is just sort of a sprinkling of computer science or dessert computer science, where, you know, we just try to drop in little things as if they're these integrated connections, and they're really not. We start talking about something and we're like, oh, that's sort of like an algorithm, and that's it. And that's not really teaching students what an algorithm is in the world of computer science. So it's important that we not just try to drop stuff in subtly and say, well, there's my connection. It has to be a meaningful connection. One thing that I would sometimes do was the dessert CS, where, you know, as soon as kids finished a project or a task, they would have some scratch activity they would get on. But again, the problem with that is oftentimes the students who are doing that are maybe our students who are able to finish a little faster, or maybe they just understood the concept really quickly. And suddenly the only kids who are getting the computer science activities and sorry, there's a very loud motorcycle coming by. I apologize. Okay, I'm gonna just power through because I think you guys can hear me. Moving away from just having computer science as this tack on to the end of some other activity. There's great ways to integrate computer science and find connections between what you're already teaching. So it's important that we look for those and not just tacking it on at the end as this kind of bonus thing for some kids. An easy thing to want to do, especially in this new kind of virtual world where we're often teaching online and, you know, we finish, and don't get me wrong, like code.org has some great lessons for students to work through, but it should be something that like all students are getting to do, and not just as this, if you finish early and you want something to do, this is it. A couple other things, and these are almost more general than just having to do with the pandemic, but there's still a lot of confusion, I think, sometimes between what computer science is and STEM. And I'm very passionate about both, but it's important that we don't confuse them. I occasionally would have teachers who come and they went, I did this great computer science lesson, like I want you to see it. And what they were doing was really a STEM lesson. The computer science was kind of, again, sprinkled in there, but it wasn't teaching kids a conceptual understanding of a computer science concept. It was kind of talking about computer science while doing an engineering project, or talking about computer science while doing some technology. So that was something I saw happen occasionally. And really, that just comes down to helping teachers understand the difference. And not all teachers have the same capacity or understanding at this time. So that's where that support and the teacher development really comes in. And an organization like CodeVA is a great resource for that, because they're going to pretty clearly help teachers learn the difference between those two things, and the difference between just computer science and computer technology. So you're already in the right place if that's something that you've struggled with, or if you know someone who's struggled with. These last two were happening before the pandemic, and they're personal pet peeves of mine. The return of the worksheet. I have 2 children, and I tell you, they did some digital things that I was like, this is just a worksheet. This is just a worksheet on a computer. This is not even a computer science specific thing, but those were some things I saw happening during the pandemic, just because of, well, how else am I going to get them to do this? And don't get me wrong, I actually think there's occasionally a time for a worksheet. There's times where like, I just need you to practice this a couple times. But especially around computer science, that's not going to be the way to get computer science understanding across. And then just because of necessity, there was a big shift this past year from small group focused instruction to whole group instruction, which many of us know is really not best practice. And I know for myself, I struggled trying to teach whole group back in the day when that was my go-to method. It wasn't until I shifted to small group. Sorry, I don't know why there's so many motorcycles in this tiny town. Okay. We need to make sure that we are all in our mindsets next year going back to really trying to figure out that system of how can I individualize and personalize my instruction, whether it's computer science or anything, but moving back to that. So those were kind of some things I saw happen just this past year and a half that I was like, ugh, we've got to move away from these things. These are not beneficial to our students. So, but the good news is I actually saw some positive things. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so some things that I have discovered, especially over the past year, that actually really work. And the first one is around curriculum. Now, as a part of the grant, we were required to create integrated curriculum. But in order to do that, I really had to wrap my head around what the current curriculum was. What was the state already asking me to do? What was my district already asking me to do? And I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. There's going to be connections. So one of my jobs was to go through and I am a big organizer. I like having everything visually in front of me. And so I made these year-at-a-glance documents where I could see vertically every month, every quarter, what students were learning. And then I went in and I took what I knew about computer science and I really tied the concepts that made sense in those in that content area. And we kind of came up with these unit ideas, these unit plans. And the key with those is really finding things that were meaningful to the students, aligned and connected to the content. And then for me, the next step was even more important, making it relevant to their lives, culturally relevant to their lives, meaningful to their lives. And the final element of that for us was making it project-based. So as they're working through these units, they should have goals, milestones, and at the end, they have some sort of artifact that shows their understanding and their progress through learning this content. And one of the tools that we used a lot, and there's just an image here, and I know it's really small, but it's actually the CodeVA CS integration sheet, which is an amazing tool that really helped me get the concept of how I should be integrating computer science with my content area. So I'm not sure if that's one that you guys have been shared yet, but it's a great one. So maybe Brian and them can share that with you. The other thing that went really well is our teacher development became much more personalized because of moving things digital. We were able to offer more sessions. We were able to really offer teachers what they specifically needed. If you felt a little more comfortable with computer science and you're ready for more, how do I apply this? How do I integrate it? We could have that. We also, myself and the coaches in the buildings, we were able to go in and really coach teachers where they were. If teachers needed way more support, they were able to go to kind of beginning level PD. And so it became really flexible. And I hope that's something that stays, that we are really thinking about the variety of teachers we have. And we just talked about how whole group instruction is not best for our students. Well, it's probably not going to be best for our teachers either. We're also individuals. We have individual strengths and weaknesses, personalities. We need to find ways to have our PD and our teacher support and development be personalized to where we are in our learning path, which with computer science is varied. I know for myself, when I first got into computer science a few years ago, I knew nothing. I really didn't understand what I was talking about, what I was doing. So it took me going to professional development with CodeVA and other organizations and learning what that was to get where I am now, and then trying it out in my classroom. That's always the critical follow-up, is making sure we take it back into our rooms. A couple other things that while I do not want to just do them this way, but they went really well, were virtual clubs and virtual field trips. The virtual clubs, part of our grant, we were required to host computer science clubs, and we had to do them virtually. But I learned so much about running virtual clubs. We did multiple clubs, but some of the most popular were Lego League, Girls Who Code. We did a coding and scratch club, and they were great. The instructors did a great job. They were able to lead the students through all these great activities. The students learned a lot. And so actually, I think we need to always keep an option for students who maybe can't stay after school, or they don't have a ride, or something, that is a barrier for some students. Maybe a virtual club option is great for those kids. Same thing with virtual field trips. It allowed us to visit a lot more places and have more meaningful connections. We had students from JMU's computer science department virtually come and meet all our fourth graders, and they all did presentations. We had them scheduled over several months. And it was such a unique experience because these were students who would not have been able to come in person, but we connected, and they weren't able to do the stuff they were normally doing at this time. So because of that, we were able to slide in and say, hey, let's get this connection and have you come talk to some third and fourth grade students. We also had students visiting places in California, in New York City, places that they would never be able to actually go on a field trip. So that was a really cool experience. I personally love in-person field trips. I think that they're one of the best parts of kids being able to go to school, is having these experiences that they may not have otherwise have. So I don't want to say only virtual field trips, but I definitely, I think that's going to be a great engagement piece in the future. The last thing that actually went really well, and I think I would continue in the future, is some of our virtual family engagement events. There is nothing to compare getting the families in the building and connecting in person. We had an event at the end of this last year that I put together for 2 of the schools that I worked in, and it was just so, especially after this year, the teachers and parents getting to see each other face to face with the students there was just amazing. But we also hosted several virtual events that were fantastic. We did Family Code Night. We were connected through CodeVA, and it was an amazing virtual experience. I did it with my own daughter at my house, and they guide you through a coding activity, you and your child, and you have to take turns coding. It's pair programming, and it's very well done. I think it would be a great option to continue to have that, especially now that many kids are taking whether it's their Chromebooks or whatever device back and forth to school and home. I think that's a great option. We also, during CS Ed Week, we hosted a bunch of virtual activities and virtual challenges that families were doing at home and bringing back into school, things like that. So I think some of our creative ideas that we came up with to get around not being able to meet in person actually are going to be great activities that we can do in the future in addition to our in-person meets. So those are just some of the things that I thought went really, really well this year, and I was really proud of. And I if you have any questions about any of the specifics, please let me know. Family Code Night is, again, a great organization, and I have a list of resources at the end of this presentation that we can share in the chat with links to some of these. So yeah, those were some of my positive takeaways. All right, so the main thing that I want to leave you with is when thinking about computer science in the classroom, whether it's virtual or in person, is just to find those connections. Don't try to just put computer science wherever, okay, well, I'm going to slide it in between this block and this block because that's where it goes. Find the connections, find the integration piece. They're there. I specifically worked in the 3rd and 4th grade curriculum, and there were so many great opportunities to connect to computer science concepts. And there were definitely times, there's some concepts that have to just be explicitly taught, just like in math. There's times you can't integrate everything. You have to say, okay, we have to learn how to do division, and that's it. Once we know how to do it, we can apply it in other areas. But there's so many connections once you have those concepts in CS that we have to make sure kids see them. Keep your expectations high. This is a big thing for me. I have seen so much success when teachers keep high expectations. My kids can do this. I can do this. It's that positive, I know it's going to be hard. It may be a challenge. I may have to work and learn something new, but I know I can do this. Because every single teacher here, every teacher in my district, they have the capability of teaching and integrating computer science and just working well in whatever setting that they are in. I've been just astounded this last year and a half seeing what happens when we keep our expectations high. Students really can be successful. A big part of my job was really connecting with the community, and I found so much support there. There are so many people that are willing and eager to connect and come into the schools. So make sure that you're looking for those resources. People like JMU, people like CodeVA, they have the resources that we need, the support that we need, wherever you are in your journey. And then just leverage your strengths. Know what where you have strengths, where you maybe have some weaknesses, and make sure that you're playing into those things, like that you're leaning into those positives. And the areas that maybe you're a little weaker, that you're looking for support in that. And whether that's in a coach, other teachers, organizations like CodeVA, I think there's a lot of different options, but it's making sure that when things get a little bumpy, we go with what we know we can do. I think that is about it. These are some resources. We can maybe copy and share in the chat. Obviously, you probably have access to the CodeVA ones. Code.org, they have a list of virtual classroom resources. And I did, as a teacher and then as a coach, I did use many of their lessons. The inclusive teaching pedagogies from CSTA was a great resource for me as an equity coach. That's the family code night link. And then some virtual club ideas that we really loved were Lego Learning and Girls Who Code. So just some things to try out. I think that is it. Brian, whenever you're, that was kind of the end of my presentation.
There we go.
I think we're going to start questions here in a moment.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. As always, there's always something. Okay.
Yes, the resources will be posted. I will try to post them actually myself, because that may be. Let's see. Oh, thank you. Oh, my hyperlinks aren't coming through. All right, Brian, are we doing questions now? Should
Yes.
Oh, here's Brian.
There we go.
I was like, I'll just talk to everybody.
Yes. I did not mean to leave you out there by any means.
No
it's
worries.
always the fun stuff. Thank you again, Brittany. That was actually really excellent, and I appreciate that. We did have a few things that popped in the chat, and I have a few questions for you as well before we get out of here. So I have a few questions for Brittany, and again, if you have a few questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we will sort of get to those in just one moment. And so one of those things is, I know you had a chance to work sort of getting this implementation off the ground, and you even spoke to it a little bit. With that role of being a CS integration and an equity coach, how did you see those two things overlapping, or the work of that overlapping, in order to sort of broaden the participation? What does that look like?
So I kind of feel like anyone who is working in computer science has to have a mind for equity. Now, my personal role kind of extended beyond that, because all four of those parts of that grant, I really had to be involved in all four parts. You can't talk about curriculum and not talk about equity and culturally responsive teaching. You can't talk about teacher development and not talk about social bias and equity with teacher development. You can't talk about creating real world tethers without talking about equity and like how are kids going to create a tether if there is no connection between what they're seeing and their personal lives? And the same thing with the student supports. If we're supporting all students, then we need to be thinking about equity. So I think as far as my role of integrating, it wasn't just me. I think my whole team has the same mindset, but my job was to kind of make sure, where are our blind spots? What are we not thinking about? Who isn't in the room for this conversation? If I didn't have that insight, then my goal was to go find someone who did. There were many times I reached out to one of our other, supports in the community or in the district and said, will you look at this? Will you see what we're missing? Who are we not representing here? And, are we handling this the right way? But I talked to so many people about equity over the last 2 years around computer science. And as I said, I don't think you can talk about computer science instruction for all students and not talk about why that is a matter of equity. So yeah, I think the two are very, very intertwined.
No, that's a great point. And I love the idea of going out and asking for others too. If you didn't know, then be able to find those particular answers. And so one of the things you did talk about is there being this implementation, sort of thinking about teachers having a way to integrate. So I'm wondering though, what was the teacher response and what were the student response to your implementation?
Well, teacher response was varied, but I think you can probably imagine the realm of different responses. We had some that were starting at the negative side, just like, I can't, I'm overwhelmed, and like, I can't do this. And we had some that were kind of like, okay, I'm gonna need help. You're gonna help me, right? And then we had some that were like, this sounds great. This will get my kids to like want to get on and do stuff with me. So we kind of had the whole spectrum, which is to be expected. And I think going into it, knowing that you're going to have that range of responses, you just go in prepared saying, okay, well then when we give our teacher development, our teacher support, we have to make sure we are adjusting what we're providing to meet all of those individual needs. Just like in the classroom, we know not all of our students are going to be right in the center of understanding everything. So how are we adjusting our instruction? So it was just kind of approaching teacher development that way, knowing that we were going to really have to hold hands with some of the teachers and walk them through and be really encouraging. And you know what, maybe they are still not quite there yet, but that's okay. It's a journey, it's a process. And so I think the main thing for many of them is just getting started on that journey wherever that is for them. And that was come what may, everyone got on the journey with us. So we didn't have anybody that just was like, no. So I think despite a range of responses, everyone got on and everyone made progress. Maybe it was a little, maybe it was a lot, but everyone showed growth. So I was really proud of that.
And the students, have you seen?
The students, I also feel like there's no surprises here, but they were 100% on board from the get-go. They love doing computer science. Many of them, and this is where I again, back to my equity talk, like there is such a big gap because some of the students already knew what to do in Scratch. I would pull stuff up and they're like, oh, let me show you how to do this, how to do that. And, they became kind of my student partners. We would pair them up. But no, students are eager to create and to build. They enjoy using technology. While students, I do, you hear people talk about they're digitally literate. That is true to a certain extent for many of our students. That does not mean that they understand how to do computer science, though. So it really does take teaching them those steps, but they are so much more willing to get in and play and make mistakes, and they don't get, it's such a great experience watching them, because the kids that I have seen get frustrated maybe on a paper project, if they're, doing Scratch or something, they just know they can undo, and they're back to the beginning, and they'll keep trying until they figure out what the code is. So I really did not see any hesitation with the students. I think it was such a great experience for them, and it was really cool seeing how creative they could they could be with things. So.
Well, that's a great point. It's awesome to sort of see how they take to this idea, especially with it being something they're familiar with to some degree. And it's, oh, I can understand this. I wonder, so the last question I have for you, and then we can see about if there are any questions from the audience here, is really about this idea of integration. And so you're working with teachers to help them to be able to implement integration in their classrooms. So what are the things that you, from your experience and your project experience, what are the things that you feel like teachers need in order to do it successfully?
I think the support is really important. And we were very lucky with our grant that we had actual computer science specific coaches in the buildings that had gone through the CodeVA Coaches Academy. So they really understood what needed to be taught, what the teachers needed to understand it. But I think regardless of whether you have that support in the building or not, I think that's where teachers need to have the opportunity to do professional development, get whatever. We had several books, which I could drop in the chat that we read as a school. One of them was a computational thinking book, and it was really simple, and it was just kind of help teachers to see how some of those concepts are really critical thinking skills, and they're going to benefit students across the curriculum. I think too, seeing modeled lessons, and to be honest, a lot of the ones that I learned from were on YouTube. I would go on YouTube and watch teachers teach this lesson. There's a really great one on binary code, and I actually watched the lesson, I taught the lesson, and then I modeled the lesson at a PD for our teachers. And I think when I started it off going, we're going to learn about binary today, like I started glazing over. The teachers are like, what are you talking about? Why are we talking about binary? But by the end of the lesson, they were going, oh, that's so cool, you know. And not only was it a really great engaging lesson, it was completely unplugged. We were using giant cards. They were seeing math connections. They were going, wait a minute, like, my students will love this. And then I had probably 6 or 7 teachers after I modeled the lesson who went and taught it in their classrooms. Some of them wanted me to come in and like help. Some of them wanted me to just come in and do it. Some of them were like, nope, I got it. Like that made so much sense. I didn't know I knew what binary was, but I do. And so, yeah, I think just getting to see how it's taught. And there are so many resources. We live in such a great time where you can kind of Google and find some good videos of good instruction and bad instruction. But, but yeah, I think just seeing the modeled lessons, getting the support in PD, and then just having the support of admin to try it out. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like we're all learning and it's a process, but just really getting to try out these new ideas.
That's great. I think that's a really great way to think about it, being able to utilize some of those resources. We do have a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to see if I can establish that. We have Aylin who asked about this. She says, how willing were the female students to participate?
I definitely think there's a little more hesitation sometimes from our female students, and sometimes from our Latina students. They specifically, having worked in ESOL, like I have an extra sensor where I'm like checking to make sure that there's that connection. And I think sometimes it was really one of the best things we did was the Girls Who Code Club was a great opportunity for our female students. It really gave them kind of that affinity space to feel safe and that this is a group for them. I think another thing that was really helpful is we tried to put up throughout the building. I printed a lot of posters and bought posters of female coders, different ethnicities. Part of my equity brain was going, okay, I want kids to see themselves in all of these different, whether it's gaming or cybersecurity, they need to see themselves. And then there's just some great videos. Code.org has their YouTube page is just chock full of amazing little snippets where kids can see that. And we kind of, on a weekly basis, we're pushing out, here's a person talking about this, here's a person talking about that. So kind of that end of it, of just exposure, and then also just giving them the opportunity to play over and over and over again. So it wasn't just, we're going to STEM and just today in STEM class, you're going to try coding and then you're not going to do it again for 3 weeks. And, then by the time you come back to it, you're going to feel like, oh, I don't remember. It was a lot of, the classrooms who were really doing it, they were doing it a lot. And so it just became kind of like any other content. And I think that really helped with just comfort level for the students. But yeah, great question.
And you sort of touched on that piece as well in terms of ESL students as well and sort of how to engage with that. So I think I was looking to make sure that I caught all the other questions in the chat. A lot of questions about the resources that you provided, as well as the integration sheet. So for those of you who have not had a chance to see that yet, that was a sneak preview to some of those things that may have come out. Particularly, that is one of our tools that have been created from CodeVA, really with to help with the idea of integration and what does that look like, how does it work, and to sort of help you think through the planning of what it can look like in your classroom. So that's something that we do have available in pretty much all of our trainings in terms of K-5 for sure, because of that integration mandate. So if you haven't seen it yet, it might be coming in the afternoon. So give you that heads up there, or the second or third day of your training. So that's there. Let's see. I want to check one more time just to make sure people are good to go there. Awesome. So it looks like all the questions have been answered. And let me just go ahead and say a really huge thank you to Brittany. You guys don't understand. She's on vacation. She still was able to make this happen in a public library, and that is just so awesome. We definitely thank you for dedication for that, and being able to power through. It was a great presentation, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much. If we can drop reactions in the room for her for that great presentation that she was able to do, that would be awesome.